Hello, good people, and welcome. Today, I am going to talk about how to handle narcissistic people. So I'm going to give you 5 ways to handle them. And if you stay to the end, I am going to give you a bonus in understanding narcissistic people for your own well-being. All right, so let's get started. Excuse me. Let's get started with the reality that there are 2 major types of narcissistic people. And I wanted to get that part out the way, because I think now in this current political atmosphere that we're in, we have a tendency to see one form of narcissistic people and not realize that most of us have been participating in relationships with narcissistic people throughout our entire life because we only see one element of narcissist. So I just want to give you 2 types real quickly, not even going to get into them in depth. If you'd like to have a full out video on just the types, go ahead and put it in the comment section and I'll consider doing it for either next month or the following month. All right. And so let's talk about grandiose, which is the first type, which is the type that we know the most these days, because this person believes that they can do no wrong, that they are the best thing since sliced bread. They have what is considered elevated self-esteem. Their self-esteem is so high that they believe that they are superior to all other people. And in this world we live in, I think that's the one that most of us have a tendency to believe that when we're talking about narcissistic people, that's the one that we most likely will reference or believe in. The other one, although not always discussed, is the vulnerable narcissistic person, which this person has the opposite. So instead of that high self-esteem, they have the low self-esteem. And that low self-esteem is really a reflection of vulnerability and feeling bad about themselves, or somewhat having a high level of insecurity. So they're self-absorbed as a result of that. So everything rotates around them. And it almost comes off as, it's self-absorbing. It's focused on self primarily as a result of the insecurities. And so sometimes this one gets lost in the conversation because we tend to always see the bigger than life, grandiose type of narcissist as the one that we're dealing with. And in this current political climate, I can definitely see how that has become the main focus of the types of narcissists. However, there are 2 types, and most of us are dealing with and living with the type 2, which is the vulnerable type, who is actually very self-absorbed or tend to be focused on themselves as a result of having these high level of insecurities. And because of this, they need constant reassurance, constant praise, and you're doing such a good job for what could be for you and I just an average day and or an average thing that we do, right? So being able to see those 2 types is very important, because when I'm setting up these 5 ways to handle, or 5 ways of how to deal with narcissistic people, it becomes important to not only focus on the grandiose, I'm bigger than life, I'm the next God, narcissistic person, but also that person who is self-absorbed as a result of their insecurities, and they tend to focus on themselves only, and the world revolves around them in some sense. All right. And so the first thing we're going to do for how to handle a narcissist is we're going to focus on the positive, right? When I say this, I want to preference that focusing on the positive in terms of what they mean to you and who they are to you in relationship to how you want to deal with them. So if someone is your mother, your father, and you have a relationship with them. So I want to make sure I mention that, because I also later on will say something different. And you have a relationship with them that you want to maintain, it becomes extremely important to reinforce and to identify the positive in order for you not to get absorbed in the negative. However, it also becomes equally as important for you to learn to avoid the negative experiences. So, if every time you go into the kitchen alone with your mother, you guys get into an argument, you wait till the room is filled with everyone else. And that way it's not focused on just your relationship with your mother and your interactions. It's everyone in your family. So your siblings, as well as your father that might be in the room, that offsets the negative energy that you might get normally. And so that way you are being strategic, so that way you're not constantly feeling beaten up or taken advantage of in that relationship. So reinforce the positive and try your best to avoid the negative. So that's number one. Number two is going to be communicate without compromising your values. And I say that because one thing that I am very strict on with the narcissistic people in my life is how much I share, knowing that my communication with that individual may not be full or whole as it would be with someone who is less self-absorbed, as well as having an equally participating relationship. And so being able to communicate, be gentle, but never compromise your own values, and knowing what to share becomes extremely important. And the reason why I say this is because thinking about the two types that we talked about, if I am self-absorbed and or I think the world revolves around me, any information that you give me can be later on used against you. And I know that feels bad or sounds bad, but that's the reality of having a person who is narcissistic in your life. So if I share something with you, that I did wrong or I wasn't successful in, you're more likely, or a narcissistic person is more likely to bring that up again and or to drop that information at the wrong time where it could actually hurt you and make them feel like the authority or expert on the subject. And so knowing that becomes extremely important. How much will I share with this narcissistic person? And so the first one is remember the positives. The second one is communicate without compromising your values and knowing how much to share. And then number three is the one where I said I'm going to say something a little bit different, is setting and recognizing when you need to step back and set new boundaries and or clear boundaries, because you may have never set boundaries in your life. And so it becomes extremely important for you to set boundaries with understanding that, because I said the narcissistic person is self-absorbed, the narcissistic person believes that they're always right, they're grandiose. That means that there's going to be a consequence to your setting of that boundary. However, you still do the boundary. So most likely the person is going to act out. They're going to resent you. They possibly may even do a negative behavior towards you. And because we talked about emotional abuse at this point, I'll link it in the the video for you when it comes to emotional abuse with Black women of color. We talked about that. So sometimes this one is where it becomes really difficult to navigate where to set boundaries, but we have to learn to do them in order for our own emotional safety. If it's not done, then they will still be hurting you. If you do it, they may have a consequence of trying to hurt you. However, you know that that's their action and their issue, not yours. And so number one was to stay positive. Number two, communicate gently and never compromise your values. And number three is set clear boundaries and or new boundaries if the person keeps violating them. And then number four, you don't want, because now we set those boundaries and they're mean, they're acting out, they're not calling you, they're telling everybody in the family that you have a problem with them because they're your mother, they should just love you. So you're becoming the bad guy in everybody's eye. And so the next one is don't assume that a narcissistic person truly cares. And I know that feels bad. Even just saying it when I was writing the list, I was like, well, how else can I say this? The truth of the matter is that if we assume that that person cares or has the same empathy level as we do, what we will do is start to take responsibility for their negative actions. And we cannot do that. Or I would ask you not to do that, because once we do that, then they will get into taking over levels of your life and monopolizing your time, your identity and self-esteem. And that in itself is an entirely different level of violation. And so making sure that we are clear so that we are not in this level of denial about who we're working with or who we're in a relationship with. So that way we can be healthy with how we navigate that person and going back into our boundaries. So making sure, so we're down four, we got stay positive or reinforce the positive, communicate, never compromise your values. Number three, set your boundaries. And then number four, you're going to not assume that that person or a narcissistic person truly cares or has the same level of empathy that you do. And then last, but definitely not least, no drama. I have yet to meet a narcissistic person who doesn't know how to start the drama, sit back, watch it, and be like, I cannot believe this is going on, as if they never, ever started the ball rolling with the drama. And so my goal is always to be very clear that I will not participate in any drama related to that person. So, for example, if that person, a friend, we used mother earlier, so I'm going to use a friend so you can have some different examples. Your friend who is always wants to be the center of attention calls you to talk about a different girlfriend. And what they'll do is tell you things like, well, she was saying this about you, and I told her that's not how Sharia acts, So as if they are the authority on how healthy and how good a friendship is and how good you are as a person, by making that other person the bad guy, and then hoping that you confront them so they can sit back and watch the drama. And really what that is getting for them, sometimes we never know, but other times it's about really them being the authority or center of the attention in the relationships. And that example was not as clear as some of the examples I'm thinking of in my head. And I'm sure if you are dealing with a narcissist, you can actually in the comments tell me a drama that that someone who is a narcissistic person started, but acted or pretended as if they had their hands off, and it was nothing, oh my God, nothing they had ever done to make this get this dramatic. Because we know when it comes to dealing with narcissistic people, there is this tendency to start it, but pretend as if they're hands off. All right. And so that's my 5, right? So number 1, remember, and 5 ways to handle narcissistic people. Number 1, you're going to remember to stay positive, but always avoid negative experiences. Number 2, you're going to communicate, but never compromise your values. Number 3, you're going to recognize that you need to set boundaries and what level of boundaries, but understanding that there may be consequences that are out of your control from the narcissistic person, like resentment, anger, and more drama. Number 4, don't assume that the person cares or has the same level of empathy that you have for others or even for them. And then last but not least, we're going to say no drama. We're going to stay clear as much as possible because sometimes they're so strategic and so manipulative, you don't even realize you're in drama until the drama has already started when it comes to a narcissistic person. So sometimes being able to step back and set that boundary is about the drama that they've already started. So last, as much as possible, stay clear of the drama. I said earlier that I was going to do a bonus on something similar to like knowing the types of narcissistic people. I have heard this word being thrown around and written a lot. And so I felt like, just in case people didn't understand it, I was going to give you a brief definition of gaslighting. And when people are talking about gaslighting, it's a psychological behavior that a narcissistic person may use to manipulate or control the situation. And so what will happen is a narcissistic person will do something extremely selfish. And when you confront them to set a boundary or to say, I didn't like what you did, they will proceed to twist the entire story or events around to make you into the one who is selfish, manipulative, and the problem, quote unquote, in the relationship. And so I'm going to give an example of this where you actually might be dating someone and they constantly are leaving, or they're constantly not dating or taking you out or doing things with you. And so what they will say is, you confront them with this and say that you want to go out more, you want to spend more time together. And they'll say something like, well, you're always busy. And whenever I make plans, you cancel them. And you're kind of like questioning, did I cancel times when they planned the event? Am I not available? So all of a sudden, you actually begin to question what you're putting or confronting your narcissistic person about in your life. And they're like making you feel as though whatever selfish behavior they are doing, you are either the cause of or the one who's actually doing the behavior. And so then you end up questioning yourself. And in some cases, when we talk about just emotional abuse in itself, it starts to become this thing where you find yourself apologizing for things that you really never even did, right? And that in itself is just a whole nother level of insecurities and self-esteem issues that can develop within you by participating in that relationship with a person who constantly gaslights. And I can think of one more example just in terms of some of the people that I may have worked with, where a young lady was dating someone and he would constantly make her feel as though she was losing her mind, like she did something to him that made him not call, that made him not want to be a good person towards her. So she was, and I'm trying not to share the incident in order to not share her specific story, but she was basically being told that she was losing her mind and a problem because he wasn't actually following through on what was considered boyfriend related roles in their relationship. And he would turn it around on how she made him not want to do those things for her, as if you would behave a certain way, then of course I would spend time with you. Then of course I would want to call you more often, and I would not just strictly talk about sex. So it becomes this level of manipulating and gaslighting to make their selfish behavior really your responsibility. All right. And so that today is 5 ways to handle narcissistic people, and a bonus, understanding gaslighting. If you guys want any more information on any of the specifics from today's topic, feel free to drop a question and or suggest a topic within the comments. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. I don't know where it's going to be. Subscribe to our channel, as well as like this video, comments. It helps us to grow and to continue to grow. And it helps me to know which videos and which topics you like the best by making sure that you like, subscribe, and or share the video. I look forward to talking to you more about being well.